What's good, y'all? It's Valsy Thoughts here. Once again, we here with another edition of Black Atheist Reacts. We're reacting to a Christian reacting to Alex O'Connor. Now, a few weeks ago, Alex O'Connor went on Jubilee, and it was the whole 25v1 thing, surrounded by 25 Christians, talking about his assertions and his opinions on Christianity and the Bible, whatever. And ever since then, it's been a lot of responses. I think Alex did pretty well, explained his positions pretty well, but it's been a lot of responses from Christians, of course, disagreeing, and of course, reacting to it. And uh, a lot of them, I haven't seen a lot of their videos, but I did stumble onto this one, and I definitely wanted to make a response to it because I did watch maybe about 10 minutes in, and I said, you know what, I got to go ahead and make a response back to this video. I did comment on her video, and I hope that me and her can probably talk one day and have a fruitful conversation, because it doesn't seem that she actually understands a lot of the atheist position. It doesn't seem that she actually has spoken to anyone who is a non-believer, at least from the first about 10 to 15 minutes that I watched of it. It seemed that way. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this video. We're gonna go ahead and react and do a response to it. And like I always say, whenever I do these type of videos, do not go on these people's pages and harass them. That's not what we're about. The reason why I'm choosing this one in particular choosing this one in particular is because she is a Black Christian, and unfortunately, Black Christians and Black non-believers, we don't get to speak a lot. Usually the conversations between Black Christians and Muslims and Black non-believers tend to be very, very contentious. Folks tend to attack each other. We don't actually have into a fruitful discussion or conversation, and much of it becomes like very, very dishonest. And honestly, on both parts, you know what I mean? So the reason why I choose to react more to Black Christians and their responses is because when I was growing up Christian, I was always told to not speak to people who were a non-believer. You know what I mean? Um, until I actually started speaking to them and realizing that they're just normal everyday people who have different opinions than I do. They're not, monsters. So the reason why I do these responses is because it seems that there are still Black Christians out there who really do not understand the atheist position, especially how a Black person can be atheist, because like the Black identity is tied so much into being either Christian or Muslim that folks like myself are just unbelievable for a lot of people. So without further ado, I'm not going to keep rambling on. We're going to go ahead and react to this. And like I said, this is just for fruitful conversation and discussion and to understand each other's position. Do not go and attack this young woman. Do not flood her page with hate messages. And if she would ever like to speak with me one-on-one, I am down for that. Anyway, let's go ahead and watch the video.
So I want to talk about Alex O'Connor. Alex O'Connor is a prominent atheist who pretty much makes it seems like his entire goal is just to debate Christians. And this is just going to be something I feel like when you're truly an atheist, you don't hold or stand for anything. So a lot of atheists, or it seems like a lot of atheists who are a part of apologetics, in a sense, just spend their time trying to debate people who actually hold beliefs in something. And for me, it seems like they mainly focus on debating Christians. Like, I don't really see atheists debating Muslims, Jewish people, Buddhist, Hindu. Like, they mainly focus on Christianity, which I want to say there's a reason behind that.
Okay, she made her first mistake. Well, and her first 2 points were both major mistakes. Number one, the whole atheists don't believe in anything type of thing. I've never understood this type of argument, because essentially you're saying if you don't believe in the same God that you believe in, therefore you believe in nothing, and that's not true. Now I understand where that comes from, because Christians are raised to believe that God is everything. So if you don't believe in a God, and their God in particular, you don't believe in anything, which is absolutely stupid. It makes no sense, because I do have beliefs. There are things that I believe in. I believe in being self-reliant. I believe in being humble. I believe in humility. I believe in cooperation between mankind. I believe in having integrity. As a matter of fact, those type of principles that I had that I just discussed, there was tattooed on my arm here. You know what I mean? These are African Andrinka symbols, and I tattooed the symbols of humility, integrity, wisdom, etc. into my arm because I believe in them so much. I believe that humanity would do well if we all, or most of us, carry those type of principles in our lives. So not accepting your God claim does not believe that we believe in nothing. And honestly, it's kind of insulting. You know what I mean? Because it's like, as a human being, you're gonna have a set of beliefs that you're gonna hold dear to you. That's just part of the human condition. And saying that a person believes nothing is kind of stripping away their humanity a bit, in my opinion. But the second thing that she said was, atheists don't spend a lot of time debating Muslims. That's also not true, because there are very prominent ex-Muslim atheists out there. Like, there's someone named, I believe his name is apostate something. I forgot what his name is, but it has apostate in his name. He's an ex-Muslim atheist. There's also a friendly ex-Muslim. He's an ex-Muslim atheist. The person she's talking about in this video, Alex O'Connor, he's debated Muslims plenty of times. Matt Dillahunty has debated Muslims. Another prominent atheist, Aaron Ra, he's debated Muslims as well. So saying that atheists who are in the apologetic realm don't debate other religions is just a falsehood. The reason why Christianity gets so much focus is because we live in the predominant Christian West. When people are trying to put the Ten Commandments in schools, or they're trying to ban transgender girls and women from playing in certain sports, or they're trying to put when they overturn Roe v. Wade, et cetera, they were doing all of this in the name of the Christian religion. They were not doing it in the name of Islam or in the name of Buddhism or in Judaism. They were doing it for Christianity. So, like, that's why it gets so much focus. It has the most power in our society. And I've always asked Christian this whenever they say, why do y'all spend so much time debating atheists? I always ask one question. Name one president who didn't profess Christianity. You can't. The most powerful office in our land, the most powerful position on this planet, has always been a Christian. They cannot win without professing Christianity. Now, we all know Donald Trump is not really a Christian. He doesn't really care about that shit. But he professed Christianity, and there's a reason why he did that. Is because he knew that's the way to win. We are not in a point of our society where a non-believer or a Buddhist or a Muslim is going to win the highest office in the land. That's not going to happen. You know what I mean? Even for a lot of Democrats out there, it wouldn't happen. That's just the crux of the issue here. Christianity is the most powerful institution in our society. So it's going to get the brunt of the criticism because it has the most effects. This is something that atheists have said over and over and over again. And I'm not sure if she's ever heard it, but if she has heard it before, then this question is nonsensical, because why would you ask that if you know the answer? But the second thing I would say is that if you haven't heard it before, now you're hearing it. The reason why Christianity gets so much focus and so much of the brunt in our society is because it's the most powerful one. It has the most effects. So it's going to get the focus. If you go online, places like TikTok, there are a lot of Nigerians and Africans who live over in the UK. They talk about Islam all the time. Why? Because Islam has more of an effect over there. You know what I mean? So it just depends on where you go. But we live in the United States, and Christianity has the most effects. So that's what we talk about the most. Anyway, let's continue.
Just watch his videos, love him. Of course, they think like, oh, he's so smart, he's so witty, he makes such great arguments. But to me, as a Christian, every time I watch his videos, I'm just thinking like, he misunderstands so much about Christianity and God and the Bible, and he's debating these things with this entire, based off of the idea he has of God, that is so just wrong. And so it kind of
Usually when Christians say this, they don't actually explain what did you get wrong. Yeah, I mean, they just say, "Oh, where you're just plain wrong about it," and you're kind of left wondering, okay, what's the argument for that? What are we wrong about? Like I said, I watched about 10 minutes of this video, 10-15 minutes of this video before I decided to go ahead and make a response and respond to the rest of it. A lot of what she's gonna be saying here is gonna be like preaching and stuff, so I might fast forward through it. But one thing before she gets into that I want to tell Christians is that when you're actually having these dialogues with non-believers, don't just preach to us. And what Christians have said to me is that they can't, talk about the Bible and God, whatever, without referencing the Bible. It's fine to reference the Bible, but to reference the Bible as the fact that this is what it says and therefore it's true is where the preaching comes in. We know that you believe that, but you actually have to demonstrate to us that it's actually true, that the words that you're saying, or the words that you're speaking from the Bible, or how you interpret the Bible, is the correct way to interpret the Bible. Because a lot of times what y'all do is y'all just preach. Y'all just say, "This is what the Bible says. This is my interpretation of it," and boom, go about your day. That's it. That's the argument. That's not really how a discussion is had, because you're just kind of preaching at that point. Yeah, you see what I mean? Um, you have to actually back up, why is your interpretation the correct one? And before you even get to that, you have to show that why is the Bible authoritative and what it says is actually true. You need to get that point first, and then we can get to why should we actually take what you say as authoritative. You see what I mean? Because if you're going to claim the truth, you're going to have to, get to a point where you're demonstrating how it is the truth. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, let's keep going. I might fast forward some of this because she does preach a lot for about 5 minutes here. So
because essentially he's trying to find like this, he's always trying to create like this oh gotcha moment, like, ooh, I just proved God is not moral, or I just proved God doesn't do this, right? He's constantly looking for a way to kind of say God isn't good, or God isn't great, or God isn't, like, he misunderstands so much about God.
yeah, this is what I was saying before. These are all just assertions, and you're going in circles, and you're kind of just preaching. You know what I mean? When it, if you're gonna ask, by what moral standard does Alex O'Connor judge God, you should speak to Alex O'Connor. Send him an email, shoot him an email. I'm pretty sure he'll be more than happy to have any sort of discussion with anybody. Um, but when it comes to atheists in particular, we all say, yeah, we know that morals are subjective. So the standard that we go by is our own standard, and you would have to show why that's not good enough, because you simply saying that, well, God created it, is again just it's a blunt assertion. There's no way to demonstrate the truth of that matter besides, for the Bible told me so. You know what I mean? And of course, you already know what we're gonna say. Every other religion says the exact same thing about their gods. So why should we accept yours as true? You know, this is the circle that Christians and non-believers kind of get into. You know what I mean? Like, we judge them by our own subjective standard. Is admittedly subjective. You say that's not good enough because, and God's morals are better because he created them. Then we ask you, okay, can you actually show that not only did God create it, but that he actually exists in the first place? And you're just gonna say, well, the Bible says this, or go on to some other, philosophical mumbo jumbo that at the end of the day doesn't mean anything. It still doesn't demonstrate the existence of a God, and yours in particular. You see what I'm saying? This is why we always go into circles until you can demonstrate that your God actually exists, and then you can demonstrate that that particular God is the one that created all morals. Then you really have no leg to stand on. And even if you were to do that, this would still make morality subjective, because if morality depends on the whims of this God existing, then morals are subject to that God. So you're in the same position that we're in. Morality will still be subjective. So this is one of the, the kind of the circles that we get into whenever we have this type of discussion, when we're asking what are the morals that you're judging God by. We're judging them by our own, and you're even judging them by your own. because like again, this is something that came from Dan McClellan, but everyone negotiates with the Bible. You know what I mean? What you take from the Bible is not what someone else, probably even your own congregation, won't take from the Bible. And what you also take from the Bible is not what someone 150 years ago took from the Bible. So you would actually have to show how you're the correct one. Like the theology of Christianity has not always been consistent. The only consistent thing is Jesus being the son of God who was sent to die for our sins. That's really been the only consistent thing. Everything else has not been consistent, and even that, Jesus being the son of God who died for our sins, a lot of the early Christians didn't believe that either. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where your theology or your beliefs have not been um through the history of it have not been consistent. So why is your interpretation the right one? And how do we know that? You know what I mean? So um that I kind of went off into a tangent there, but when it comes to judging God by what standard, it's our own, essentially. And if it's not good enough, then that's fine. You can say it's not good enough, but why is yours good? Why is your interpretation the right one? Like how do we know that? Anyway, let's continue.
And he's intentionally trying to find an issue with God, right? Because he has an issue with God, so he's looking for it. So for me as a Christian, it's really like frustrating when people listen to his arguments and think they're actually logically sound or
You see what I mean when I say that the question is never really answered. She just made an assertion that, you know, you don't understand God and that's it. Well, explain it, and then explain how do you know that, and then explain why your interpretation is correct, and then explain how you can actually demonstrate God exists. We just can't take what you say at face value. Yeah, you know what I mean. It's you need to do a little bit more work than that. Just to be saying, oh, you don't understand God and that's it. That's the truth of the matter. Like how do you understand Him? And why is your interpretation correct and not some other Christian? Or why is Christianity correct? You know what I mean? There's a lot more work you have to do than just say that, oh, you don't understand it and that's it.
they're actually like true depictions of God, because it's like he judges God by a moral standard that he can't even prove objectively. Essentially, he tries to use the morals that God created in the Bible to judge or condemn or try to find a moral issue with how
Okay, one thing here, she said that she's trying to judge God by a standard that he can't prove objectively. But are you not in the same exact position? Because in order to prove objective morals, and those objective morals came from the Christian God, you have to first show that the Christian God exists first. And you cannot show that objectively. There's no way to show that objectively. Like most Christians would would readily admit that. I think most Christians nowadays would readily admit they cannot prove God objectively. So you're in the exact same position. So I'm not sure why you're criticizing Alex O'Connor and atheists for that matter for not being able to prove moral standard objectively when you're in our same position. How do you prove your God exists objectively? Most Christians will admit that they can't. Now, you may not be one of those Christians. That'll be fair. And if you can prove God objectively, then cool. Go ahead and do it and win your Nobel Prize. But if your proof is gonna be, your testimony or, some sort of Alvin Plantinga, Will Lane Craig argument, then I'm sorry, that's not gonna work. You know, because there's problems there too, and we can go through that. But like at the end of the day, you cannot show your God to objectively exist, and you're criticizing Alex O'Connor and atheists by proxy by saying that we can't prove something objectively exists. No one can. I mean, you can't. So where are we going with this? Like, we have to break the circle here because it's like at the end of the day, we're all just kind of giving our viewpoint, and none of it can be shown to be objective. So where are we at that point?
how he sees the world, right? Because he apparently believes there's all this suffering in the world and all of this. And I've made a video talking about how like God has already solved the problem of suffering, and that suffering was solved through Jesus. And when you actually believe the Bible and understand it, suffering is not an issue for me as a Christian. I feel like atheists see suffering as this huge issue because they reject the solution that was given by God to suffering. And so to me, it's like when you ignore Jesus, when you ignore, and that's what Alex O'Connor does a lot. He ignores that Jesus is God personified in human form. And so he never brings up Jesus when he's making these arguments for God. And so it's like he's talking about a very misinformed idea of God, because to talk about God or to talk about Christianity and the Bible and never once mention Jesus, to me shows you don't have a full understanding of who God is actually.
All right, three things here. Number one, she's just again making the blunt assertion that Jesus is God. You have to actually show that's true first before we accept that as truth of the matter. Because if you ever spoke to an atheist before, we're always going to ask you the same thing. How do you know that? That's number one. Number two, she said that atheists kind of reject the solution to suffering. Here's my problem: suffering still happens. So, if Jesus was a solution to suffering, why do Christians suffer then? Christians still suffer. So how would Jesus be the solution to suffering? As a matter of fact, a lot of Christians will tell you that when you accept Jesus as your Lord and personal Savior, you would actually suffer more because the world doesn't like that. So there's actually more suffering in Christianity, according to the theology that I was raised under, and according to the theology that a lot of people still spread around the world. So if accepting Jesus means that your life is all peaches and cream, uh, the fact that Christians still suffer would actually debunk the entire thing. So that's a problem. And I'm pretty sure that's not what she's trying to say, but that's how it came off here. But the third thing that I would say is that she didn't actually watch the video. And I can tell she did not actually watch Alex O'Connor's surrounded the entire thing, or she doesn't actually watch his content, because he brings up Jesus all the time. Even in the video that she's responding to, he brought up Jesus. That was I think his third or fourth assumption, that there's no sufficient evidence that the resurrection actually happened. So he did bring up Jesus. So the fact that she says that he never brings him up shows to me that either one, she didn't actually watch the video that she's trying to criticize, which is intellectually dishonest, or number two, she doesn't actually watch Alex O'Connor's videos, which again shows intellectual dishonesty, because he does so all the time.
Jesus is God personified, God in human form. Every characteristic of God, Jesus has, because Jesus is God. He is the.
All right, some of this is going to be preaching, so I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through it.
Because what other God in any other religion has Jesus, literally, other than Christianity, which is a personal, a person, a man that we can say who lived and died, right? That's the whole point of the Bible. So anyways,
when it comes to a personal God, I do know other religious traditions had that. The Middle East had a lot of personal gods. I think Zoroaster, Zoroaster I think was a prophet, but I think the god in that religion was also personal. The Hinduism also has like avatars of the main god. I'm not sure if the main god is Krishna or Vishnu or Shiva. I'm not sure which one is the main personal god, the main god, but that god does have avatars that come down personally. So other religions do have personal gods that come down in human form. Like Christianity is not the only one, and it's not even the first one. Um I think ancient Egyptian religion also had gods that came down in human form. Um a lot of West African religions had the same thing. Gods that came down in human form, and humans that became gods, that floated up to the sky or whatever. So Christianity is not the sole one that has this type of unique thing of gods becoming personal people and personal people becoming ascending into godhood. Christianity is not the only one that does that. It's not even the first.
every time there was the debate he did, it was like 25 one atheist versus 25 Christians. I didn't
Mhm.
watch the video, but I was watching
Hey, see, I called it. I called it. I told y'all. She didn't watch it. She didn't watch. Hold on.
someone who was like debunking a lot of the arguments he
There you go. You see, she watched someone else's video. This is what I'm talking about, y'all. That's not honest. I'm sorry, sis. That's not honest. You need to actually watch these things for yourself, because you wouldn't have said that Alex never brings up Jesus. If you watched that video, you would have saw that he did bring him up. So like, you need to do these things, do the work yourself instead of watching someone else's video. And I'm not. That's not to try your face, not to diss you or anything, but that was a very lazy exercise. You know what I mean? That's poor research. And now you're putting out this video, and now you have an uninformed opinion yourself. You know what I mean? This is what I'm talking about. Like, I called it. She didn't actually watch his video. You know what I mean? So that's a problem. You know what I mean, that's a problem. You need to do your due diligence in actually researching what he actually said, because Alex O'Connor brings up Jesus all the time, which is what I was like, yo, that's strange for her to say that. But now the video that you're actually responding to, he brought up Jesus, and over here you're admitting that you didn't watch it. Yeah, I mean, that's poor research on your part.
I couldn't even get through the first one without being like, this is so frustrating, because he made like a point about animal suffering essentially, and saying like, oh, God can't be moral if he allows animals to suffer on the earth. And it's like, how can God be moral? I don't even understand. I honestly kind of don't understand the arguments that they make.
Yeah, that's obvious, because that's not what he said. The argument was that animal suffering makes God immoral. The argument was that the unnecessary suffering of non-human animals makes a loving God less likely. That was his argument. Because why would an all-powerful, all-loving God, traits that many Christians put on God, like, this is not atheists saying that this is our idea. Christians put this idea on God, that God is all loving and all powerful. So why would an all loving and all powerful God not want to stop um, unnecessary suffering? Specifically for he brings up non-human animals, because everything that you could say about free will, the fall of man, etc., all of that, can be explained away when it comes to human suffering. But the unnecessary suffering of animals, just like how he says, like a deer who breaks their leg in the woods and gets an infection and dies a horrible death because of it, like, that seems completely unnecessary. That sentient animal is going to suffer and die a painful, horrible death for literally no reason. Yeah, you see what I'm saying? Or for what seems to be no reason. What is the actual point of that? Because according to a lot of Christian theology, animals don't have souls. Humans have souls. You know what I mean? So what's the point of bringing about a creature that feels pain, that feels suffering, only for it to just suffer and die for seemingly no reason, if it's not going to go to heaven itself? You see what I'm saying? Or if it doesn't experience that heaven itself. You know what I mean? So that was his argument, not God is immoral, because he even brought up the hypothesis of the evil God, where it solves all this. And the hypothesis of the evil God is that God is not all loving. Once your God is not all loving, then boom, that solves the entire problem. But if you're going to put the attribute that God is all loving and all powerful, then suffering causes a problem for that. So that was his argument. This is why you should actually watch the video and not watch what someone else presented to you, because right here you show that you didn't understand. I mean, you admit that you don't understand it, but like, that's the problem here. If you're presented secondhand information, you won't actually understand the argument.
Because there's just so many like false presumptions they create about God. And like I said,
I mean, if the false presumption is that God is all loving, then that's the presumption that Christians have made. Y'all don't want to tell that God is all loving. I guess you guys get that from the Bible, but actually no, you do get it from the Bible, because the Bible says so. But if God is not all loving or all powerful, then the existence of unnecessary suffering is explained away. It's fine, because if God exists, he just doesn't love everyone. Boom, suffering is going to happen. But if God exists and he is all powerful, he does love everyone, then why does he stop some suffering that's unnecessary? Specifically, suffering that's unnecessary. We know that there's going to be suffering that that has to exist for some reason or another, like childbirth, for example. But we'll get into that because Alex made a good point about that. But like the suffering of non-human animals, and even I would say unnecessary suffering of a lot of humans seems not just seems, but it really is unjustified. There's no reason to bring those events about.
It seems like the main focus Alex O'Connor has is he's trying to essentially say God, the God of the Bible doesn't have morals, but based off, but I'm always just like, by what morals does Alex O'Connor have that he believes he can judge God?
Well, you will have to ask Alex O'Connor. But if you were to ask atheists out there, people have different um, opinions on what they base their morality off of. Mine is just based off of pure empathy, negative and positive consequences, human well being, equality, and degrees of harm. That's how I judge my moral standards. Things that make those things worse or violate any of those things, I view as immoral, and things that make those things better and uplift any of those things, I view as moral for the most part. Yeah, I mean, there is such a thing as weaponized empathy. So for the most part, so that's just me. And when I look into the Bible and I see things that God commanded or did or justified, then I'm like, okay, this is not a moral creature according to my own standard. Again, we believe that morals are subjective. Even if your God exists, morality will still be subjective, in my opinion. So that's how we're judging the moral standard. You would have to show why that's not good enough, and so far you really haven't, and no Christian has shown me what that's not good enough. Is always just well, God exists, man. That's completely unconvincing. um but yeah, you would should ask Alex O'Connor, but his whole argument in that first assertion was not about morals. It was about a loving God. It wasn't about morals at all.
Right? Like where do his actual moral standards come from? By what moral standards does Alex O'Connor judge God, condemn? And essentially that's why I said, like, he's trying to use the moral standards of the Bible that God created. Like, how can you use God's own moral standards to try to say God is not moral?
Well, that wasn't his argument, number one, but number two, that's what internal critique is. If a person has a moral standard and doesn't actually follow it, then that's hypocrisy. You can critique them from that. Or if they have a moral, they say they have a moral standard, but that moral standard brings about things that we would typically view as immoral, then you can judge it. That's how that I think that's kind of how internal critique works. If I'm not mistaken, someone can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But like this is this is literally how it works. Like, what do you mean that God created this, therefore you can't judge it? What it like, I think your position doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I'm saying, because if God set this up and these are the things that from Christian theology is what's moral or immoral, and we see God doing or commanding things that Christian theology says are moral or immoral, then we can judge his morals. Like, I that's where it comes from. That's just like how the critique works. I'm not sure what's not clicking here.
You see how it doesn't like really process correctly when you actually say it, but that's essentially what he's doing. God created the moral standards. So how are you trying to use the standards that God already created to essentially say that God is not moral? And it's also like, what moral high ground does Alex O'Connor believe he has to make these, in my opinion, judgments of God? Like, it's almost like he believes he's better than God, that he knows more than God. It's like there's a very prideful spirit in, honestly, I would say in Alex O'Connor, but honestly, in a lot of atheists, in my opinion. It's a spirit of pride, and it's also like a spirit of you think you know more about God than, or about the world, or about God than God does, apparently, because
I'm not sure where she's going with that, but I would say this, right? Here's what I've always said. Not only do I think I'm better than the God of the Bible, I think you are. I've said this to Christians plenty of times. It's not just I think that I'm better than the God of the Christian Bible. I think you're better than the God of the Christian Bible, because a lot of the things that the God of the Christian Bible has demanded or brought about or caused, you wouldn't do it yourself. You wouldn't do it yourself. You know what I mean? And you would agree that those are heinous, horrible things to do. So not only do I think I'm better than the God of the Bible, I think you're better than the God that you worship, which is always goes back to the question of why would you worship something that, commands genocide and rape? So it's just one of those things. Like, why would you worship something like that? Because you wouldn't do those things. So I don't understand why you would worship that type of thing. You know what I mean? So not only do I think I'm better, you're also better. You deserve better than your God.
they seem to have this idea that their views on how the world should be, like they have this idea that there's a certain way the world should be, and because the world isn't the way that they think it should be, somehow that means the God of the Bible did something wrong.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say to that. Yeah.
Standards and their own ideas of what the world should have been like if
Mm.
if a God exists. They have this mentality that the world is supposed to be a certain way. And
Well, it's specifically the God of the traits that you all give. God that's all loving, God that's all powerful, and God that's all knowing. You know what I mean? If a all knowing, all powerful, and all loving God exists, is basically the Epicurean paradox. Essentially, if God is willing and able to prevent evil, then why does evil exist? But if God is willing and unable to prevent evil, he's not all powerful. But if he's unwilling to prevent evil, if he's able but he's not willing to prevent evil, then he's just a dickhead. But if he's both able and willing, then we go back to the beginning. Why does evil exist? If he's not able or he's not willing, what is this God then? What is it a God at all? Like, this is where the argument comes in. It's basically the Epicurean paradox. That's what we're trying to explain to you. I don't think any Christian has ever came over the problem of evil. I think William Lane Craig has taken a shot at it. Um, a couple of TikTok debaters have taken a shot at it as well, but their arguments are basically sophistry. So it's a big issue within the theology of Christianity and Islam, in my opinion, as well. Um, but Islam kind of solves this by saying that simply God is not all loving, but Christians hold steadfast to God being all loving. So you have a problem on your hands. That's where it comes from.
so they almost are using their own, it's like they're basically just using their own ideas, because the world isn't the way I feel like it should be. If a God exists, therefore God does not exist, right?
No. Well, no and yes. You have to talk to atheists who say that um God doesn't exist because of XYZ. I'm not one of those. I'm more of a it's less likely and therefore I don't believe it. But I think I already explained this argument already in the last time. You should probably speak to more non-believers and get their opinion on it. Have those actual discussions, and you'll come up with a more better idea of what atheists would say about this. There are atheists who say that God does not exist, um, and there are atheists who say that particularly and specifically that the Abrahamic God doesn't exist, the God of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Specifically, that one doesn't exist. And I think they'll probably say the same thing about Hinduism, but Hinduism has no effect on our society, so they don't talk about it. But there are those who will specifically say the Abrahamic one doesn't exist. for one reason or another. But rarely the argument is ever, the world is shit, therefore God doesn't exist. That's rarely the argument. So you should probably speak to non-believers and see why they would say that your God doesn't exist. Um, Me is just because of the utter lack of evidence. Things that don't have evidence or manifest in our sense experience typically don't exist. So that your God has never manifested in our sense experience, therefore probably doesn't exist. That's what I would say. But yeah, you should probably talk to more um, atheists or non-believers or people who are not Christian to get an idea of why they think that your God doesn't exist.
And it's like, to even have that type of mentality is really like you're building your entire argument around your own ideas of what the world is supposed to be like, right? Because
Yeah, yeah, the world's supposed to be better than this. So I'm kind of lost. I'm not sure where she's going with that.
you're taking, you know, you're basically putting your ideas of what you believe the perfect world is, and then with God, if the world was perfect, there should be no suffering. If the world was great,
Yeah, if the world was perfect, there should be no suffering. Yeah, all right. So you get it now. Hey, W, y'all. I think she gets it.
if the world was so amazing, if God exists, then the world should be like this. Essentially, is the argument that Alex O'Connor makes to create the scenarios that he does. Like, if God exists, then why are animals suffering?
Well, that's not really his argument, which is why I said you should go back to actually watch the video. His argument is more around the existence of a loving God, because a loving being wouldn't just let suffering happen. You know what I mean? We would loving beings typically do something about suffering if they're able to do something. I think when it comes to Christianity, a lot of Christians would say that non-believers and atheists project our own idea of God, but I think it's them who actually project their own idea of God. The reason why I say that is because, like, we would say that if we have the power to end suffering, we would do it. You know what I mean? If we see a homeless person on the street and we have the money to give to that homeless person for them to go, go ahead and go to McDonald's, get a McChicken or something, we would do it. I think Christians also do it. You know what I mean? But the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of people out there, whether they believe or not, whoever believes, whoever doesn't believe, there are a lot of people out there who have the ability to do something and do not do it. A lot of us suffer from from the bystander effect. You know what I mean? There are many prominent stories of, women being attacked and no one does anything about it. You know what I mean? Because of the bystander effect. A lot of us have that bystander effect. And I think a lot of us project that, or a lot of Christians project that onto the God that they worship. He essentially has the bystander effect. He sees all suffering happens and does nothing about it. You know what I mean? And yeah, we're thinking, why doesn't he? Because he has that power. You know what I mean? But there are people who do have the power to do something and do not do anything. Our president's best friend, Elon Apartheid, for example, he has the power to end a lot of suffering, and he simply does not do it. So I think what a lot of Christians do is project that type of behavior that we see from human beings and just project that onto their God. We don't do anything about it, so God doesn't. The difference is that the God that you purport to exist actually has the power. We do not. There are some people on this earth that do, and we see that they don't. So now you project that onto God that He doesn't. At least that's my psychological hypothesis. And in the very least, that's a little bit of a tangent. Let's go ahead and continue the video.
A perfect moral God wouldn't allow animals to suffer. So he makes it's all based off of a presumption of what he thinks the world is supposed to be like in order for God to exist. But again, it's taking that his own ideas of the basically some moral failing he believes exists because of his own ideas of what it would mean for a perfect God to exist, and then using that assumption to try to claim a moral failure of the God of the Bible. But the actual problem is not the moral failing that he thinks he found. It's that you have this idea that there is supposed to be no suffering. But why would you have that idea? Where does this idea that there's not supposed to be any suffering even come from?
I mean, you actually said it earlier. What did Jesus die on the cross for? You said earlier that the solution to suffering is Jesus and accepting Jesus dying on the cross. If that's the case, then yeah, according to your argument that you're bringing up, if that's a solution to suffering, then suffering shouldn't exist. Now, suffering might still exist with humans who don't accept Jesus, but even in that theology, even in your own theology, suffering will still exist with humans because a lot of Christians will still say that you'll suffer even more under Jesus because God is gonna test you or whatever, or the world hates you or whatever that the hell that means. You know what I mean? So suffering's still gonna happen. So what is the solution to suffering? Because you said earlier the solution was Jesus, but people still suffer under Jesus, and animals can't accept Jesus. Like, what are we gonna say to a dog? Wolfy wolf, Jesus wolf? I don't know. What do we say? You know what I mean? So dogs are gonna suffer, cats are gonna suffer. Like that's gonna happen. You know what I mean? So how is Jesus the solution to that? Like you said earlier in this that Jesus is the solution to suffering, and now you're saying that the idea that there should be no suffering is nonsensical. Like which one is it? I'm confused.
In an objectively atheist world, if God really doesn't exist and y'all are still suffering, why does suffering exist? A moral failure of the God of the Bible. But the actual problem is not the moral failing that he thinks he found. It's that you have this idea that there is supposed to be no suffering. But why would you have that idea? Where does this idea that there's not supposed to be any suffering even come from in an objectively atheist world? If God really doesn't exist and y'all are still suffering, why does suffering exist in a world that is devout of any objective moralities, of any objective goodness or bad? If we're just existing because we're random mutations over billions of years, what, and no God actually exists. It's just like atheists don't really know how to be atheists objectively. They have to borrow so much from a theistic worldview in order for their world to even make sense, which
That made no sense at all to me. I don't know where you're going with this. What do you mean? What is suffering? I mean, because in an atheistic worldview, suffering is just part of our universe. It just is. Like it doesn't come from anywhere. It like there's things like natural selection. You know what I mean? Like in natural selection, predation is gonna happen. So animals are gonna eat other animals, and people under natural selection and random mutation and evolution, we're gonna have things like selfishness. We're gonna have things like narcissistic personality disorder. These things are gonna happen through our evolutionary processes. We're gonna have things like antisocial personality disorder. These things are gonna happen under the evolutionary process because evolution is not a perfect. It's not a ladder. It's not a goal. You know what I mean? So under evolution, these things are going to happen. So we expect suffering to happen under our worldview. Suffering is expected. It's not something that shouldn't happen because there's no God. That doesn't even make any sense. Like, I'm not sure what you're asking here. Suffering under all worldview is actually expected. Yeah, I mean, we kind of expect suffering to happen. We kind of know that it's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like that's not a problem for us. The problem that comes in, that I would say for Christians, is that y'all are saying that this all loving, all powerful, all knowing God exists, but then you have suffering. If it knows, Is it not willing or doesn't care to stop it? If it cares, does it not have the power to stop it, or it doesn't know? Like, which one is it? You know what I mean? Like, so like that's the problem of the God that y'all created. Now, if you take away any of those properties, then the entire issue doesn't exist anymore. But y'all insist that God has all these properties. You know what I mean? So that's where the problem comes in. In our worldview, since there is no God, nothing that cares, nothing that is all powerful, and nothing that is willing to stop anything, suffering is expected. So we're not borrowing from anything. And I'm not sure where you're coming from with this. Like that this whole line of reasoning doesn't make any sense. And I'm not sure if you ever spoken to a non-believer before, because if you have, they would definitely would have corrected you on this. Because under our worldview, suffering is expected. We expect suffering to happen. That's not a problem for us. It's a problem for you if you put all these attributes onto your God. If you don't, then it's different. But if you do, then suffering is a problem in your worldview, not ours, because we expect it to happen.
Which is just a whole another argument I could get into. But basically,
Please don't.
if you truly believe God doesn't exist and they're still suffering, animals are still suffering, right? People are still suffering. Where does all that suffering coming from if it's not dependent on God existing at the end of the day?
It's coming from us. It's coming from natural selection. It's coming from the fact that this is just a part of the world. Like, what do you mean come from? Suffering is not a thing that, you look under a rock and there's a suffering. That's not how suffering works. Suffering is a description that we put on undesirable events that have massively negative consequences. That's what suffering is not a thing to have. It's a description of a condition. That's what suffering is. You know what I mean? So when people ask where does suffering come from, what does that even mean? Suffering is just a thing that happens. It's just a description of an event. It doesn't come from anywhere.
It's like this the whole entire concept, or I feel like the whole entire argument is based off of, you know, a moral person doesn't allow suffering.
Yeah.
But when you actually read and understand the Bible, God himself suffered for the good of humanity. He literally, when it's that's what I'm saying, like ignoring Jesus in all of his arguments about God is actually the biggest reason Alex O'Connor will never fully understand God, because you can't understand God without understanding Jesus. And it's like,
So again, like Alex O'Connor brings up Jesus all the time. This is why I say I don't think she watches his content, and she already admitted she didn't watch the surrounded video because he did bring up Jesus. Um, and the thing is, the question, like, because the claim is that God himself suffered in the Bible because God was Jesus, etc., etc. That's fine. The argument that I think that she's not understanding is, why does those set of events need to occur in order for God to reach the goal that he's trying to reach? If the goal for God is to forgive humanity, why did Jesus being tortured and being a virgin sacrifice, why did that need to occur? You know what I mean? If God wants us to be closer to him, why does it need to occur that, earthquakes and tsunamis and sicknesses and animals dying in the most horrifying ways? Why does that need to occur? It doesn't it doesn't seem to have a point to it. Alex said this in a video to someone else. If I were to punch you in the face and then give you $20,000 afterwards, you'll be thankful for the $20,000. But why'd I have to punch you in the face? Why not just give you the $20,000? You know what I mean? It's the same problem here. Like, it doesn't seem necessary that all these horrific things that happen to animals and humans, it doesn't seem to have an actual point to it. If the point is to bring glorification or bring us closer to the kingdom, he can do those things without horrific things happening. There's no point of that happening. You know what I mean? Like, my parents are from Haiti. What was the point of the earthquake back in 2010? What was the point of that? If he wanted Haiti to be closer to God, first of all, Haiti is 80% Roman Catholic. I don't know how closer to God they can get. You know what I mean? But the fact that 200,000 people had to lose their lives, what exactly was the point of that? You know what I mean? Like if he wanted Haiti to become a more Christian nation, I'm not sure how more Christian they can become when they're 80% Catholic, but like if that's what he wanted, he could have easily just showed up at the president's door or something like that. Like, why let 200,000 people lose their lives for, you know, the co-pastor of my dad's church to lose his eldest daughter? Why was that necessary? He was already he's been already been a Christian for years and years and years, so he didn't need to become closer to God. Why did he have to lose his daughter? It seems pointless. Now, I'm not saying that the co-pastor of my dad's church losing his daughter is what makes God doesn't exist. That's not my argument. My argument is, why did that need to happen in order for God to reach his goal? What exactly was his goal? The main argument isn't, you know, these bad things happen, therefore God doesn't exist. The main argument is, why do these bad things in order for you to reach whatever goal you're trying to accomplish? Whatever God is trying to accomplish, why does people dying, children being touched by adults, children being born with bone cancer, the deer in the wood, the deer in the woods, you know, breaking its leg and dying in a horrific way? Why does that need to happen in order for God to reach his goal? The why is the question, not Jesus suffering on the cross. That's not the question.
Like the whole Bible is actually about Jesus. No man gets to the Father except through Jesus. So Alex O'Connor ignores the one person that the whole entire Bible is about. If you're attacking Judaism, that's different because, again, that's just the Old Testament. So,
Nah, Cap. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. This is something that I hate Christians do. You can't throw out the Old Testament when it's convenient, because the entire point of Jesus dying on the cross was to take on the sins of humanity, correct? Why did Jesus need to take on the sins of humanity? It all goes back to Adam and Eve, but that's the Old Testament. So are you going to say that, you know, Adam and Eve doesn't matter either because that's Judaism? That's the Old Testament. It doesn't matter anymore. Like, we can't do that. You know what I mean? And in my opinion, that's dishonest. We can't just throw out the entire Old Testament now. You see what I'm saying? Because like, the moment we do that, the moment you say, "Oh, this is the Old Testament," the moment I bet if I were to ask you, do the Ten Commandments still matter? She'll probably say yes. Does Noah's Ark story still matter? She'll probably say yes. Does Sodom and Gomorrah story still matter? She'll probably say yes. Does Adam and Eve still matter? She'll definitely say yes. Because without at the first fall of mankind, there is no point of Jesus. None at all. That's in the Old Testament, though. So you cannot say that's Judaism, the Old Testament, whatever. We're gonna throw that out. Now we have to apply the Old Testament here too. Like, it's dishonest to say that that was just the Old Testament is Judaism. So was Adam and Eve. So if that part doesn't matter anymore, Jesus doesn't either. Like, Christians gotta stop doing that. We just can't throw out the Old Testament. That matters.
but he ignores the entirety of the New Testament.
He didn't.
It seems like in every single argument he's made about God or about the Bible,
He doesn't.
he's pulling verses solely from the Old Testament, and
He didn't. He pulled it from the New Testament as well.
all of these quote unquote moral failings he finds in the Bible of God not being quote unquote all of these things he feels God is supposed to be. But at the end of the day, the whole point of the Bible, the entire story of the Bible, can be broken down to God so loved the world, John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. So
All right, some of this is gonna be preaching. I can already tell. I haven't gotten this far in the video yet, but I can already tell that some of this is gonna be preaching, because whenever you start pulling out verses like that, that's when we know the preaching is gonna start. Here's what I would say though, when it comes to all this, you know, the point of the Bible was to get all to Jesus. I would suggest that she actually read some biblical scholarship. Even Christian biblical scholarship would even point this out. Much of the Bible was written over the course of thousands of years. So there are books in the Bible that are for certain audiences, and they're not about Jesus at all. One of the most famous books that Christians love to use is the book of Isaiah. And they say that that book was about a Messiah, was about Jesus coming back. But if you actually read biblical scholarships, even from Christians themselves, they will tell you that the book of Isaiah is about Israel. It's not about the Messiah coming back. It's not about a Messiah. You know what I mean? Now, Christians nowadays interpret it as part of the Messiah, but even the early Christians knew that Isaiah was not a messianic thing. You know, and I think it was written during the time of the new Actually, no, it was written before the first century, so I'm wrong about that. But yeah, if you look at the early Christianity, even a lot of them didn't think that Isaiah was about a messianic figure. You know what I mean? So that's what I would suggest that she does. Like, if you're gonna say that the scholarship is wrong somehow, some way, you're gonna have to actually show how they're wrong, because a lot of these books, especially after the Pentateuch, they're for different audiences. They're not about Jesus at all. And the point of those books are not about Jesus at all. The entire book of Isaiah is about Israel, um, saying like it's basically like propaganda for the Israelites to know that they're going to defeat their enemies one day. Isaiah is basically a propaganda book, you know what I mean? Which is not a bad thing, not necessarily, but they were being oppressed, so of course they needed some hopeful messages. I'm not gonna say that they didn't need that, but yeah, they were at war. You know what I mean? They were A lot of them were in Babylon. A lot of them had to go back to Israel, et cetera, et cetera. So Isaiah was written around that time of the Israelites needing a hopeful message. So that's not wrong or anything like that. But it's not about the Messiah. My point to bring that up is that when Christians says that the entire point of the Bible, from the Pentateuch all the way up into the Gospels, is all about a one shot line to Jesus, it's really not. Like, if you read Ecclesiastics and Habakkuk and Job and all that, none of that is about Jesus at all. Daniel, none of that is about Jesus at all.
And not wanting to have to punish us, because a moral God cannot allow sin to go unpunished. And that's where I feel like atheists also ignore that the actual problem is sin. It's like every single time they just gloss over the fact that God doesn't just punish people for no reason. People are doing these horrible things that harm one another. And then when God steps in and says, in order to stop this, because he gave us free will and he's not forcing us to follow him or not follow him, the only really option he has is to end your is ending your existence in order to not negate your free will, but also not allow you to continue doing things that are harmful to yourself and other people. And so,
Well, you see, that's where the question then comes in. Like I said earlier, why would he have to end your life? um for example, people who are drug addicts, people who are like hopped up on heroin and meth, we don't need to end their life in order to get them off of meth, because heroin and meth is damaging to yourself, right? It's damaging to your body. Alcohol is damaging to your body if you're an alcoholic. You know what I mean? Is that those things are damaging to your body. We don't need to end your life in order for us to get you to stop doing those things. We can have an intervention with you. We can get you psychological help. We can get you medicine. You know what I mean? We don't necessarily have to end your life. But y'all saying, for God to stop sin, whatever the hell that is, he would have to end your life. I mean, what even is sin? Because the thing is that a lot of people talk about now. We know that what people usually talk about having sin, like unaliving people, stealing things, things like that. Those harm other people, assaulting folks. Those harm other people. So yeah, those are sins. Like I get it, and but there are also things that people can consider sins that are not harmful to anyone or themselves, like homosexuality, for example. That's considered a sin, but that doesn't harm anyone. It doesn't harm the people who are homosexual. You know what I mean? People would say that lusting is a sin. Lusting doesn't harm anybody else. It doesn't harm the other person. Now, of course, if you're addicted to porn, yeah, that's pretty harmful. But that's an addiction. Yeah, I mean, me looking at a fine chocolate lady walking down the street and saying, "Damn, that's a fat ass." You know what I'm saying? Like, that doesn't really cause any harm. Now, if I say that out loud, she's gonna be offended. So of course it's gonna cause harm. But like, if I keep my thoughts to myself, you know what I mean? It doesn't harm her. It doesn't harm me. Now that might make me a bit of a chauvinist, but yeah, I like beautiful women. All right, don't make me go ADHD on a tangent. But at the end of the day, like, who does that harm exactly? Doesn't harm me, doesn't harm her, doesn't harm anybody. So a lot of these sins that people say exist are thought crimes, essentially, or things that don't harm anyone. You see what I'm saying? Cross dressing doesn't really harm anyone. You feel me? So it's like when people are bringing up, sins or whatever, we understand that there are, sins that harm others. Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, killing people, assaulting people, stealing their things. Those cause harm. We get that. Yeah, you feel me? But that's why, like, I have a moral standard that understands degrees of harm. Because if a person steals a loaf of bread to give to a starving child, are we really mad at that person? We're not really mad at them. Now, I mean, the store owner might even give them even more food. You feel what I'm saying? So we're not really mad at those people. You see what I'm saying? So, like, that's why my morality is based on degrees of harm, because stealing a loaf of bread from a shop to feed someone is not really, it doesn't really cause a lot of harm. You know what I mean? But if you go inside and rob the place with at gunpoint and steal all the money out the cabinet and steal $1,000 worth of groceries, then yeah, sure, that caused a lot of harm. You see what I'm saying? So, like, that's why I have different degrees where, and within the Christian theology or Christian moral system, there are no degrees. You know what I mean? Everybody is the person who steals a loaf of bread is just as bad as the person who robbed the bank. You know what I mean? And which doesn't make any sense to me. But I don't want to, I'm going on a whole tangent here. I'm sorry. If sin are the problem, which sins are we talking about? And are all sins equal? If all sins are equal, why are they equal? Like, I think that's the main issue that atheists have with the concept of sin.
So when God, creates life and then takes away that life, and atheists are like, what? How can God take end the life of the people he created, of his own creation? And that's why it's like not under actually fully understanding God is how you honestly get to make the arguments Alex O'Connor makes. Honestly, in my opinion, it's like you don't understand God actually at all because you ignore the actual Bible and what it act like. You don't under, it seems like he really just doesn't understand the Bible. He doesn't understand God. He doesn't understand Jesus because he.
Well, this is a problem. Like I said in the beginning of this video, Alex O'Connor has actually studied theology at, if I'm not mistaken, it's Oxford. So he definitely understands the Bible and he understands the history. He probably understands it better than your pastor does. You know what I mean? So he definitely understands it. And he actually has brought up Jesus, like I said, multiple times. And he's shown how he understands the theology of Jesus multiple times, which shows that you probably have never watched his content. But other than that, you're not actually explaining anything. If you're gonna say that, atheists have a problem with God creating life and then, taking it away at his own whim, then yeah, we have a problem with that. That seems to be very, very cruel. If you're gonna say, well, you just don't understand God, what are we not understanding exactly? You're not really explaining what was misunderstood. You know what I mean? You're also accusing Alex O'Connor of not understanding the Bible or God, but this is a guy who actually spent years studying this stuff. So I think he has a good understanding of it. But if you're saying that he's overlooking something, what exactly is he overlooking? Because you're not actually explaining. You're just saying that he's overlooking, or you're actually not explaining what he's overlooking. You're just saying that he doesn't understand God or the Bible. What did he miss? Like, what are any of us missing? You're not really explaining anything. This is the type of argumentation that I've always not only find it pretty annoying, but like it doesn't get us anywhere. When you just said, "Oh, well, you just don't understand," you just move on. What was not understood? You got to explain. You know what I mean? Because so far you haven't.
He's full of so much pride. He thinks all of his ideas about the world are right. It's like he thinks he knows more than God. And Alex O'Connor, I hate to tell you this, you didn't.
If y'all see the video skip to the next part, it's because like I edited it out because it was all just preaching.
People don't really think about stuff like that. Like, why do I exist? Why am I here? What's my purpose? I feel like for me, I think about stuff like that because I've had existential crises since I was like 13, 14. Just why am I here? Why do I exist? What's the reason? And you don't really find purpose or meaning in an atheistic worldview. And then please for like the.
Okay, well, that's a huge problem because you can, you really can, and whenever I speak to Christians and they bring stuff like this up, it really, really annoys me because I know that they spoken to non-believers before and were corrected on it, and they still say it. Now, I don't know if she's ever spoken to any non-believers before, so I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she's never spoken to any non-believer, so she's never heard it before. You can find meaning through a non-God worldview. For example, myself, just to give a bit of a story time of myself, I've witnessed a murder before, and when I did witness that, it caused me to have PTSD. Like, it was a horrific thing to witness, right? It was one and only time that I ever seen it, and it caused me to have PTSD. I couldn't sleep at night for months. You know what I mean? So, when that happened to me, I had no one to speak to. I had no one to turn to because no one really, I don't think anyone really understood it. It turns out that my parents did understood it because they've witnessed similar things before. Like I said, they're from a third world country, they're from Haiti. They've seen shit before. You know what I mean? But I thought they wouldn't understand it. So I didn't speak to them about it. And in our community, that happens a lot. In our community, as Black people, we don't have a lot of access to mental health facilities or mental health care or healthcare period. We don't have a lot of access to it. I started noticing that a lot of low income um, people from the hood projects and stuff like that, people from where a lot of my friends grew up at, they're going through a lot of this as well. They go through a lot of PTSD, they go through a lot of trauma, but they suck it all in and they don't talk to anybody about it. And from what I could see, a lot of crash out behavior that we see from young men, a lot of Black young men in the hood, a lot of it is just, trauma dumping essentially. They have PTSD and they want to take their own life. They want to take their own life, but they're taking the way out of someone else taking them out, which is why they do crash out behavior shit. You know what I'm saying? Why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because I want to be a mental health counselor. And I think my purpose in life is to help these people. I don't believe in a God, but I found my purpose through that. You see what I mean? So when you say you can't find purpose or meaning through an atheistic worldview, is not only wrong, it's insulting because again, you're stripping humanity from people. All humans want to find a purpose and meaning in life. All humans have that. All humans have, or I would say most humans have gone through existential crisis. We think about stuff that you're talking about, you know what I mean? Which is why I'm kind of assuming that you never even spoke to a non-believer before, because we all have had existential crises. You know what I mean? We all think about why are we here and what are we grateful for? You know what I mean? We've all gone through those things, or I would say most of us have gone through those things. So this is not something that's, concentrated within a God belief, but finding meaning, finding purpose, you can find those within the atheistic worldview. We just find that purpose in ourselves. We don't need a 2,000-year-old, we don't need an Iron Age, book from goat herders to tell us what our purpose is. My purpose is not to glorify some narcissistic man in the sky. My purpose is to help my people. My purpose is to help young Black men unpack their trauma and express themselves and decouple their masculinity from misogynistic and patriarchal ideas. That's my meaning. That's my purpose in life. You know what I mean? Not whatever this ancient book tells me. I don't think that's my purpose. You see what I mean? So you can find it on purpose through an atheistic worldview. It's not just all nihilism. And like I said, when y'all make these type of assumptions, it's really insulting because again, y'all stripping our humanity. Yeah, I mean, humans strive for purpose and meaning. To say that if once you have an atheistic worldview, you don't find purpose and meaning is just completely incorrect and it's insulting.
Life in me, because anytime I make a video talking about like atheism and Christianity or just my faith or apologetics in general, there's always like people who are atheists who take it like I'm personally attacking them. I do not think all atheists believe or think the same things. I'm literally just talking about like an apologetics worldview. An atheist has no belief in God, right? So I'm not saying every atheist believes the exact same thing. I know every atheist doesn't believe the exact same thing, the same way every Christian doesn't believe the exact same thing, but you hold a worldview that like I said, the worldview is what I'm really talking about. Even if that worldview is maybe not exactly the same for everyone, the overall worldview of an atheist is that they don't believe in God. So,
So what was the point of? I don't get it. If you know that the worldview of an atheist is simply not believing in God, then saying that through an atheist worldview you can't find purpose, you know that's BS. Then you know that's bullshit. Then like, what was the point of saying that? I that's that's really annoying. So what was the entire point? What was the point of going on that spiel of and under an atheistic worldview, I've had existential crises and meaning and purpose is not found through, the atheist. What was the point of saying all that if you know that the worldview of an atheist is simply not believing in God and that's it? You know that you can find purpose then. What would that I just got really annoyed, y'all. What was your point then? This seems like a fruitless exercise. So what are you getting at? So everything that you said about atheists before, you knew it was what BS. Like if you know that an atheist worldview is simply not believing in a God, everything that you said about purpose and morals, etc., it it wasn't true. I, okay, let me just keep watching the video because at this point we have about maybe 10-15 minutes left of the video. Let's see what else she got. This video has gone on long enough anyway. If she just goes on to more preaching or repeating herself, I'll just go ahead and end the video there. But like her statement here just undermined everything. Like it literally just did. It undermined everything she was talking about. So I don't know what else to say at this point. Um, we'll go ahead and keep on going, but this is rough.
at the end of the day, I just feel like, specifically when it comes to Alex O'Connor's arguments, that some people, I feel like you have to be very just, I feel like you have to be a very wishy washy Christian. You're probably, if you're a Christian and you watch Alex O'Connor's videos and you think Alex O'Connor makes good points, to me as a Christian, I think that means you have not really tested your faith in God. You haven't questioned enough of your own belief in God if you think Alex O'Connor's points that he makes about God are actually logically sound or are actually, finding a real moral failing in God. Because
I mean, I 100% disagree. I think Christians interacting with atheist content, um I've seen Christians interact with atheist content and walk away from it believing even more. I think it does test your faith. I mean, I think it really does test your faith. I think it has to. What you're doing by not actually engaging in it, because honestly you haven't actually engaged in his content, because earlier you said that he never brings up Jesus. He does all the time. Earlier you said that he doesn't really talk to Muslims. He does all the time. And earlier you said he doesn't understand the Bible, and the man has a degree in it and can recall Bible verses at the drop of a hat. So he clearly does know, read, and understand it. You haven't said what he's missing or what he overlooked. All you said was that he doesn't understand God, but you haven't explained how he doesn't. You know what I mean? So you like the arguments are not really matching up here. You see what I mean? So um I think if a Christian does interact with Alex O'Connor and they say, okay, he is making good points, and I want to actually uh, counteract with it and make some good points, or discuss it myself, then yeah, I think that's a good exercise to do if you want to test your faith. You know what I mean? Because he's one of the most prominent atheists out there. So that would be a good idea, in my opinion. You know what I mean? So um, I don't know. I 100% disagree that uh, interacting with Alex O'Connor's content, realizing that he makes a fair point, and trying to discuss it intellectually or honestly is not testing your faith. I think that's one of the greatest tests of your faith, to interact with a prominent atheist who discusses Christianity and critiques it, and being able to actually interact with it and trying to come up with a good defense or argument against it. That's 100% a good test of your faith, in my opinion.
like I said, at the end of the day, by what moral standard does Alex O'Connor, like, what moral standard does Alex O'Connor stand on? Like, what even, where,
Okay, she's repeating herself here. I might just fast forward.
but he doesn't even have a worldview that morals are objective. It's like everything he's saying, he can't even.
But the thing is, under a worldview where morals aren't objective, you can still critique another person's morals. I don't see the contradiction there. It seems like she's trying to bring up a contradiction where if under your worldview morals are not objective, you cannot, argue against someone else's morals. But that's the entire point, because morals are subjective, so we can argue against someone else's morals. And it's like I said before, even if your God were to exist, morality will still be subjective.
Even stand on fully, because his worldview doesn't even offer objective morals. So it's like,
It doesn't have to. That's number one. But the second thing that I would say is that there actually are atheists who actually do argue that objectives can be moral without God existing. You know what I'm saying? So you should talk to them. I'm not sure who was it again? There are atheists who argue that, but Alex O'Connor might be one of them, as a matter of fact, that objectives could be moral without a God. I think there's an atheist called genetically modified skeptic as well. I think he's argued that before. Um, who else? I think Holy Kool-Aid, he's argued that before. I think Stephen Woodford, Rationality Rules, I think he's argued that before as well, that morals can be objective even without a God existing. So there are arguments that exist out there for this position. So, you don't have to necessarily follow Alex O'Connor. A worldview doesn't have to offer objective morals in order for you to critique another, because, again, we believe all morals are subjective. That's why we critique others.
how can you actually say God has a moral failing when you don't even believe objectively morals exist? It just makes every
Don't have to.
argument he makes almost extremely disingenuous, because it's just like, it really is fueled by a pride in his own ideas, but
Okay, yeah, she's starting to repeat herself. Let's go ahead and fast forward through this.
because he ignores the reality of Jesus, and he ignores, how the Bible talks about sin being the actual problem.
All right, so I had to fast forward through a little bit. So she's back to accusing Alex of not understanding Jesus or bringing up Jesus when he has multiple times. So we're getting to the point where we're kind of repeating ourselves here. I'm not sure if I should watch the rest of the video. If there's anything else, any other thing new that she said in the rest of the video, then I'll definitely probably make a complimentary uh to this video. But at this point right now, she's essentially just rehashing everything that she said before. And we can probably end the video here. Like I said before, what I would invite this young woman to do is have an actual discussion, not just with Alex O'Connor, but any other atheists out there. Like I said in the beginning of this video, I think Black Christians, Black atheists, and Black Muslims, and Hebrew Israelites, etc., people who believe, Black people who believe and Black people who don't believe, we should talk more to each other, because Black people who believe, if believe it or not, y'all don't really talk to us. A lot of y'all don't talk to us. A lot of y'all get y'all information from like other people, what other people are saying, or from secondhand information, just like how you did with the whole Alex O'Connor video in Jubilee. You got secondhand information. You didn't get it straight from the source. You know what I mean? You can actually go talk to Alex O'Connor. You can send him an email and see if you guys can have a discussion. You can do that. You know what I mean? Again, this is going to be posted on my personal YouTube channel and the Black Atheist Coalition YouTube channel. Shout out to everyone who subscribed. If you see this on the Black Atheist Coalition channel, if she sees it on that channel, that's a platform where we definitely have these discussions. If you go to the live section, we're always on TikTok having these discussions. I'm always on TikTok having these discussions as well. I mean, I live stream it to YouTube. I would suggest actually speaking to atheists, because you said every time you make these videos, atheists respond and everything like that and say things in the comments or whatever. But have you actually one-on-one spoken with one? And if you haven't, you should. You should, because throughout this entire video, I don't think you actually understand our positions. I don't think you actually understand what our worldview actually is. Um, and several times throughout this video, like, yeah, I felt insulted. You said that you're not talking to us personally. You're not speaking to me personally. Yeah, that's fine. But you're making sweeping generalizations, which are in fact insulting. And when you do that and you thinking that, I mean, the crazy thing that I found out about this is that you accuse Alex O'Connor of, talking about things that he doesn't actually fully understand, but you're talking about things that you don't fully understand, which you said was prideful. So you're kind of guilty of the same thing that you're accusing him of, which is what I said was the projection that a lot of Christians do. But I don't want to get into insulting anybody. I would invite, I think her name is Just Jasmine. I would invite her to, let's go ahead and actually have a discussion and see what our different points and what our different worldviews are, and see where you can, where there are degrees of things missing. If you've heard a lot of what we've said before, then repeating it over and over again is just dishonest. You know what I mean? Is you don't have that move anymore. It's just dishonest if you keep doing that. But other than that, like I said before, do not go to this girl's page harassing her. Um, do not engage in any type of harassment, any kind of type of insults on their beliefs or their appearance. I'm not about that. I'm all about dialogue. If you watch any of my personal lives that I do on my channel, you'll see that I'm not about insulting people. I'm all about dialogue. You know what I'm saying? So if she would like to have a dialogue, I would love to have one. But I do think that black non-believers and black believers need to talk more and build bridges more, and have more open dialogue to see where we're missing from each other and see what's not actually clicking. You know what I mean? But other than that, I'm gonna go ahead and say peace. This was, I'm gonna do more of these. Y'all can send me more of these videos. I would love to go ahead and do more Black Atheist Reacts. And that'll be it. You know what I mean? Again, go ahead and like this video, subscribe, comment. This is going to be posted on 2 channels. So I appreciate you all being here. And that's it for me, y'all. Yeah, I mean, pray for me. I'll think for you. Peace.